So I always like to begin with the early life, what led you into the discipline, why you thought mathematics would be intriguing. And Cliff, you suggested that it was laziness. And I can't ever quite seem to understand how laziness and mathematics go together.
Well, I perhaps was being a little facetious with that. Actually, my interest in mathematics started probably in high school with the geometry course. In those days, it's become out of custom right now, but in those days, geometry course was basically a course in logic. Very important was the proof of the various theorems, and I was attracted by the beauty of the construction of pure logical array of arguments. This is true for theoretical mathematics in general, and it's part of the reason that the mathematics majors are popular for law schools. They deal in logic just as well. Anyway, my parents, although I was the first in my family to attend higher education, were very supportive and in fact expected me to go on to college. And I did, Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. I actually initially thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. Everybody did in those days, almost everybody. But when I actually got there, I enrolled as a physics student, but taking the physics courses, I realized it was the mathematics that really attracted me, and I switched to that in late my sophomore year, I believe. And the laziness business. It was easier to just continue with my studies, especially since I was really enjoying them, than it was to go out and fight for a job. And after I had finally graduated from Lehigh, I thought, well, you know, can I keep doing this? Or do I have to investigate the real world? I found that I could keep doing this. So I applied for various assistantship programs for graduate mathematics and finally accepted one at Rutgers University. Rutgers is the State University of New Jersey. Anyway, as I say, it was kind of facetious just to say laziness, but I really did enjoy the beauty of mathematics, and that attracted me. And I kind of wanted to avoid work too.
Well, I'm going to come back to the beauty in just a second. But Barbara, when you were young, did you have any role models of women mathematicians? Were women encouraged to take up mathematics? I don't think that.
No, I don't think so either. No, I just happened into mathematics, and I think I mentioned to you, girls weren't encouraged in math at all, I think. I finished college in 1962. This was before civil rights, and it was perfectly okay to discriminate against women. Everyone considered it okay if there were two applicants for a job to say right out in public, well, you're equal, but I'm going to take the man because he's going to have a family and he's going to need the money, and you'll probably just get married and leave. And that's how it was when I was applying to graduate school. Graduate schools in mathematics preferred men, but my scores were good enough, so I was accepted at Rutgers. And I was told that I probably wouldn't last because I had a teaching assistantship, and I observed right away the first day there when I went to the first meeting of the teaching assistants. There were 20-some of us. I was the only female in the room. I noticed that right away. And
yeah, something like that would jump out at you, wouldn't it?
And they told also, by the way.
Yeah, it was fun. But they told me that they didn't really expect me to last. They had accepted a woman in this area 10 years before, and she had quit. But I did last, and the next year they had more women and more women. And one of the women who followed me became a very well-known mathematician. So I was kind of glad to pave the way for women at Rutgers.
Was it tough at all? Did you ever feel any, I mean, you talk about it was sort of given that you would weight things to the men, but did anybody actively come up to you and say, you know, you're just not cut out for this, or was it a different kind of discrimination?
No, no one said, because my scores were
Scores
good
were so
and I
good.
did very well in the classes
Yeah.
compared to the men, so they accepted me. Yeah.
It's funny how numbers don't lie, right?
That's right.
Well, Clif kind of talked about this, and so I want to, one of my heroes growing up was Bertrand Russell, and he would experience bouts of suicidal thoughts, but one of the things that kept him going as a young man was the beauty of mathematics, and he felt that he was drawn to understand and pursue that beauty. Clif, you talked about it. Is there something about mathematics that most of us who don't go into math or are afraid of math are missing? And Barbara, you can take a hit on that one too.
Actually, I think so. The beauty really comes from the fact that you know, if once you construct a proof, logically the correct proof, you know what you have is truth. And that's a real attraction. There's no question about it if you can prove it.
Yeah. Barbara, anything to add about that?
No, that's good.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, you know, you'll see, this is a beautiful equation, and, you know, it's kind of a simple expression, a squared plus b squared, you know, et cetera. And you think, oh, yeah, I guess that's beautiful, but it doesn't sort of grab you like, you know, something like Rodin or something. But, okay, so you both met at Rutgers. But what were the prospects for mathematicians in those days? Did you expect to teach together once you both were newly minted PhDs? And Barbara, why don't you start on that? You can hand it over.
Well, the prospects were pretty good those days. This was when there was a lot of funding in National Science Foundation and you know, satellite research, and so there was a lot of demand for mathematicians and scientists. We ended up in teaching. We applied for jobs, and we decided we should be in the same place, or at least in the same city. And we had offers in Massachusetts. And we had been on summer vacation in Alaska during the summer. And when we came up here, we said, gee, it would be kind of interesting to see what it's like in winter. And the year we were applying for jobs, there happened to be 2 openings at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And they were a little bit behind the times. They didn't know about nepotism yet in that department. And a lot of other departments, they did worry about that. And we applied, and they made us 2 offers. So we decided to come here for a year or 2. But that's you know, most of you have had that same story. You came here for a year.
Yeah, the anti-nepotism thing was very common in the universities at the time. The time was 1969. And we had to either find a school that did not have such rules, or two
Schools in the same
two
town.
schools in the same area where we could get separate jobs. And apparently the University of Alaska hadn't thought about the problem in those days. And our choices were there or Worcester, Massachusetts, where I had an offer from Worcester Tech and Barbara had one from Clark University. And yeah, we said, yeah, it wouldn't be interesting to go to Alaska for a year, maybe even 2. That was almost 50 years ago now.
Well, and would your plan B was to go to Australia at some point?
Yes. We have gone to Australia, but only as visitors.
Well, and I want to, you just touched on it, but I was so intrigued to hear that in 1966, you drove up here in a VW bug, camping on the way, on the Alcan. There's got to be a great story or 2 associated. I don't know anybody's driven the Alcan that doesn't.
Well, yeah, actually, it was a nice vacation. We went up to Montreal first and then drove across the top of the Great Lakes, took the Alaska Highway up and visited Fairbanks. And we went down by way of Haines and then took the ferry down to Prince Rupert and drove back. I think we went back into the United States in Montana somewhere, visited Yellowstone on the way, and visit my family in Chicago. And interesting thing, we sent postcards back. Our assumption, or at least my assumption, was that the mail service was going to be extremely slow. So for the whole trip was what, at least 6 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And for the first 3 weeks, you know, every week would send a postcard. And I figured, well, these aren't going to get there till after we get back anyway, so I'll quit sending them. My family got very upset. We were sure we'd be eaten by bears or something. There's my story.
Yeah. Barbara, anything to add to that? No bears? You know, okay. Well, now, when you came up here, what was the mathematics department like when you got here? Who was teaching and what was it like?
Well, let's see, the department head, and most of these people are gone, but it was Bob Brown, and Tom Head was here, Phil Van Veldhuizen, Bill Cashin, Bob Sullivan, and Jack Distad, right. And Jack's family is here. Pat Andreessen, I don't know who else. That's about it.
So students, and was it a robust department? Did you have a lot of students? What was the?
It was relatively small. There was only a bachelor's program. We certainly taught a lot for the engineering students. We were located in the Duckring building. We were in the College of Mathematics, Physical Sciences, and Engineering. And our dean was an engineer.
Chuck
Yeah.
Belkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck Belkey was the dean. The department was relatively small and was devoted almost exclusively to service courses, mostly for engineering and education. It grew over the years. Eventually, by the time I was department head, was many years later, it was a Department of Mathematical Sciences, not only mathematics, but computer science and statistics as well. And we had like 100 students, both undergraduate and graduate, master's degree programs in both, this was towards the end of my tenure there, master's degree programs in both mathematics and computer science and statistics, and even a fledgling PhD program in mathematics.
You mentioned the Duckring building, and as I told you, when one of your former students heard that I was interviewing you, emailed me and said that he recounts being in an advanced math class one day, and you were going through a really long, complicated equation, and everybody's just barely hanging on, and it's hot, and there's kind of an attention deficit disorder going on, and you paused at one point, looked at the class, and said, "Is this boring or should I continue?" And the guy said there was a really long silence until he replied, "Both." And, well, it must have stuck because he's a physical oceanographer and quite successful in his field. But does that bring any recollections to you?
Well, for one thing, this was up on the fourth floor, I believe, of Duckring. It was always hot. Didn't matter what the weather was outside. I do remember teaching in a classroom there. It was, I believe, applied math, applied calculus for engineers course, where the classroom was relatively small. It had maybe 20 people in it, mostly engineers. It had blackboards on all, those days they had blackboards, not whiteboards, blackboards on all four walls, and I started writing. It was a complicated problem. I started writing at the upper left on the front blackboard, and by the time I finished, I had gone all the way around the room. Now, I don't remember saying what was quoted quite that way. I suspect it was more like, "I know this is boring, but we're going to go on." But I don't really remember the incident.
Barbara, do you have any recollections about teaching math and some of the challenges. Well, I guess the point is, and I asked you about this a little bit earlier, but is there a secret to teaching math? So many people are math phobic, and others who are required. This guy who wrote me said he did well in the class, but he didn't think of himself as a mathematician, and he didn't think he was particularly gifted that way. Is there a way to teach it that overcomes that resistance? Is there something going on there? I mean, you did start the Osher Lifelong Learning after all.
That's a hard question to answer. The problem that we had at the university level was that students were already biased against math. They picked that up, I think, in grade school. And you say, we're going to solve this word problem, and they would just freak out because word problems were, and somehow they should be taught in grade school that this is fun. This is a puzzle that we want to solve. And that seemed to be missing. And by the time they get to college, it's really hard to overcome that.
Well, since we're on the subject, I guess we touched on it, but what was the moment that you two realized that this was something you were good at and you loved doing it? Do you remember that moment, Barbara?
No, there's no single moment,
There
no.
isn't?
No, I had to, my story is pretty bland. I had to pick a major when I got to college. And I knew from high school that I always seemed to have really good scores in anything mathematical, won contests and things like that. So I thought, okay, I'll have to put down something, I'll put down mathematics. But I enjoyed it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cliff, how about you? Was there a moment, a aha moment?
Well, as I said before, the geometry and construction of proofs was interesting. Then we got to word problems, where you were actually trying to formulate something in terms of mathematics, and then solve the mathematics. And that, if you did the problem correctly, came back and gave you something about the actual situation. I was kind of fascinated by that. One particular moment, no, it just kind of grew.
Yes, kind of. Okay. Well,
I'll add one more thing. As Cliff said, there's the satisfaction of solving a problem. You can work on a problem, especially in advanced math or some research area, for days. And then finally one day you go, one morning, and you figure it out. And there's a great reward in that.
I can imagine. I remember seeing Fermat's last theorem, and when he was recounting, there was tears in his eyes when he finally got the insight, and he was just so, he said it was the greatest moment in his life when he solved that equation, found a way through. Well, and just kind of, mathematics, we should note, is a huge subject. There are all sorts of different pursuits in it. What were your initial attractions, or what did you initially pursue as mathematicians for problems or fields, and did that alter over time and you entered into other things that became more interesting to you? Barbara, I'm going to start with you only because I know you took further classes in computer sciences and helped start that bachelor degree program. So talk a little bit about that.
I started math in abstract algebra. That's what my PhD was in. And I did a little bit more work in that area. But then I had a sabbatical at Berkeley in 1976. And I was still working on math, but I took the opportunity to start auditing computer science classes. And I got to know some of the better known computer scientists at Berkeley. And after several years back here at University of Alaska Fairbanks, I started working with Tom Head, doing research in theoretical computer science in an area that actually was kind of similar to what I did in mathematics. So I did migrate into a different field.
And boy, talk about timely. Two things would come to mind when you say 1976 in Berkeley. those were the heydays of the hippie movement, and, you know.
A little bit past, yeah.
Well, a little bit, but still Berkeley. I mean, come on. Did any of that touch the mathematics programs, or was it pretty insulated from Berkeley culture?
Well, I think the mathematicians were pretty isolated from it.
And then the last thing is, of course, computer science is really coming into it. So it really was a burgeoning field at that time.
Oh, it was. When I graduated from college, there were no computer science classes at all, or even graduate school. There were no computer degrees. I remember in college having a field trip to New York City to a bank to see their big computer. It was that, you know, that odd a thing. So when we came here, shall I talk about computers here?
Sure, and then we'll hand it
Oh,
over to Cliff. Well, why don't you keep going?
Okay. When we came here, I don't think there were any computer classes. There may have been one in the electrical engineering department called digital computers, but there was certainly no networks or anything like that, or small computers. There was a big computer in the Bnell building. And I think by about early 1970s, there was a degree in the business department in computer information systems. And Ed Gauss used to operate the computer center. And if we wanted to run a computer program, we punched cards and handed in a deck of cards, and the next day came by and hoped that the deck stayed in place. So I can see some people remember those days. So there was, by early 70s, there was an associate degree in computer information systems from the business department, but that's all there was. Well, after I had been to Berkeley and came back, so this is the late 70s, there were a lot of people, students, requesting more than an associate degree in computer science. And Ed Gauss was very eager to have one, and he really didn't have any of the background in it. So I found that at the university there was something called a Bachelor of Technology degree that was an add-on degree for an associate degree. And so I put together in the late 70s a Bachelor of Technology in Computer Science, which would help the students who already had the associate degree to go on for a bachelor's degree, which they liked. But one of the important things for us was that it allowed the math department to get into the computer business. The business people were not happy with me. When I went to the academic council to get this degree approved, they objected. They said, we'll take care of the computer degrees, but we got it through. So we were able to get the computer courses into the math department. And then a few years later, in about '83, Ron Gatterdam joined the department, and he had more experience, and he put together the Bachelor of Science degree in computer science. So what I did was have that intermediate degree and got it into the math department because business wanted to keep it, and engineering wasn't especially interested in those days.
Cliff, why don't you take over your beginning emphasis in mathematics, and that did it change over time?
Well, when I got into graduate school, the research area did change, but only because the initial advisor that I had in summation theory went elsewhere, and I had to switch it. And I looked around a bit, and I found an advisor in differential equations, and that seemed interesting. It was fairly closely aligned to what I had been doing in summation theory, and I started working on that. So I kind of backed into it. But regarding the computer science, let me say one thing, that when we got there, in 1969, when we arrived, there was no computer science anywhere. As Barbara said, the business had later developed a small associate program, And they had designs on a bachelor's program, but basically Barbara sidelined that, brought it to math, and eventually we had a math sciences department which included computer science, and later on statistics as well.
Let me follow up on this point a little bit with you both, since you later became head of the mathematics department.
Mathematical sciences.
Mathematical sciences.
By the way, let me say that since I left, computer science has split off and is now their own department. So now it's mathematics and statistics together. Computer science is a separate department.
Good. So that's kind of where I want to go. When you put together a mathematics program, what do you look for in faculty? Are there certain targeted areas that you look for that you want your department to represent, or how does that process go?
Yeah, there definitely are. There are certain areas of mathematics where if you're going to graduate someone, they have to have acquaintance. Algebra is one, analysis is another, topology, which is really a kind of a generalization of geometry, is yet a third. And Barbara talked about our going to Berkeley. When I was there, I split half my time mathematics and half operations research, which is a new field to me. And I brought some of that knowledge back and started teaching operations research courses as well as mathematics. That's not an area that the mathematics department has to cover, but it's kind of an added bonus. Anything I missed there?
No.
So anyway, as far as the staffing goes, you want to make sure you cover those areas. We were fairly flexible. For example, I taught courses in all those. Well, I don't think I ever actually did topology. I did topology in some of my analysis courses, but I didn't cover that area. But we had people that did. We had people in all those areas.
Well, I'll come to students here towards the end, but one of the things I remember reading one time is someone saying, you know, we made kids take these courses, let's say algebra, and which I'm sure is an important subject, but this person said if we really taught them more about probability or about statistics, that would be more applicable to their everyday life, especially if they're considering buying a lottery ticket or something like that. And so I'm wondering, do you think in some ways that math education should be shifted, or should there be emphasis in certain directions that aren't really emphasized now, or have mathematical programs really kind of fine-tune things and that's purring along?
Well, actually our biggest problem as far as bachelor students has been preparation, grade school, high school preparation in mathematics. One of the things I mentioned just glancingly before was that proofs has kind of been taken out of geometry now in the high schools, in a lot of high schools anyway, apparently not all. But that's a lack, I think, a real, that's logic, that's basic stuff. And the background, the standards, I think have slipped, they really have. And we feel that definitely at the university level when people have to take a lot of remedial courses. And you have to divert some of your resources to remediation. It's kind of unfortunate, but it happens. And it happens quite a bit at the University of Alaska.
Well, I have a different take on your question. I think that it's very important for people to study things like mathematics for the sake of training their minds, just to help them think and be logical. And I think that's very practical. Yes, it's true that abstract algebra that I study has just about no practical applications, but it helped mathematical thinking helps you think about lots of things, to be logical, to analyze things. I think that's the real value of mathematics.
Well, Barbara, let me hold on to that microphone because I want to talk. You retired in 1990 and then started something that you didn't have any training for, as I understand, the Elder Hostel. Talk about that.
Oh, I didn't start. Elder Hostel was in existence. And in fact, the previous state director for Alaska was Michelle Bartlett. But the position was open and I was retiring and the dean said to me, you know, what are you going to do? And I said, oh, I'll probably write math textbooks or something. And she said, well, there's this job. It's Elder Hostel. Why don't you apply for that? So I said, oh, okay. And it sounded interesting, developing programs for older people to travel to Alaska and see things. So I applied and they flew me out to Boston for an interview. And so I met the president of Elder Hostel, and he was looking at my interview, at my resume, which was my regular resume, and he said, there's absolutely nothing on this that qualifies you for this job. There were research papers and committees, but I had read the entire state director's manual on the 13-hour trip there, so I knew all about it and told him what I was going to do and got the job. And it was fun. It was about 8 years. I could travel all over the state, developing programs for elder hostel groups to come to. But then the job ended because they reorganized and there were no more state directors. However, while I was with Elder Hostel, they also were involved in what they called Institutes for Learning in Retirement. They don't call them that anymore. They're lifelong learning programs. And so I learned all about this concept, the lifelong learning programs. And so after a few years of not having the job with Elder Hostel, I got some people together, some old colleagues, and then I called someone from AARP and from retired teachers and got a little committee together and suggested that we start this. And for the administrative part, I went to, what's his name, who was provost? Reichert, Paul Reichert. And I said, Paul, do you mind if we start this? And he said, what will it cost? And I said, nothing. I have $2,000 left from the old program. And he said, fine. So we didn't do any written proposal. We didn't do a survey. This committee got together and we got 8 courses, and we sent out a notice for people to come for an opening, just to come to this thing. That was it, but it was word of mouth. And I told people on the committee, if we all invite 2 people, we'll have 25 people, and you know, we'll get this going. Well, over 100 people showed up for these classes for old people, and we had to double the number of classes. Let's see, Mary Ann, were you on the committee? Mary Ann was on the committee. Anyone else here?
I was.
Oh, yeah, you And it took off. The hard part was the chancellor didn't know about it. And I got a call from the newspaper saying, you know, we have nothing going on. We want to publish an article about this. And I thought, oh my, you know, the chancellor can't see this in the news minor first. So Nan Myers, who is back there, happened to be working in the chancellor's office. And so I got the written proposal or something to her, and the chancellor was out of town, and she got it into his inbox, deep down as if it had been there a long time. But anyway, the program took off, and we had fun doing it. We first called it Adventures in Lifelong Learning, but we discovered, Mary Ann just realized that was a motto for Elder Hostel, and so we were afraid that was
Copywritten.
yeah. So we changed it to Alaska Lifelong Learning. And then I noticed that there was something going on with something called OSHR, but I didn't investigate it, and I got a call or an email from the OSHR Foundation, and they said, we're supporting lifelong learning programs who are in need of money, and we're looking for one in every state, and we see that you have a website, and would you like to apply for this for a grant for, what was it, $25,000 or something? And they said, but we want it really short, no more than 7 pages. And I had done NSF grants, and this was
They were a little bit longer, were they?
This was unbelievable. They didn't want more than, so I applied, and we were in exactly the category that they wanted, established but needing money, and we got the grant. And they said, if you get up to 500 people, we can give you an endowment of $1 million. And they did. But there was a catch to all of this. They would only give us any of this money if we changed our name from Alaska Lifelong Learning to OSHR Lifelong Learning Institute. So I met with our committee, and within approximately 3.5 seconds,
There wasn't a lot of infighting on this one, was there?
we had a new name.
Well, that's great. Well, let me just, well, we're talking about that, and I'm going to ask about your latest venture in a minute, but is this, I mean, as the baby boomer generation rolls through time, I mean, this is a category or a constituency that really is not often addressed, but is getting more attention today. Is that right?
Right. The man who gives all this money out is Bernard Osher, and he's in his 80s, but very active. And he wanted to fund these organizations because he really thinks that the older people these days are going to remain involved, and it's necessary for them to keep up to date on things and to be involved in the community and actively doing things. It's very different from our parents' generation. Older adults are out there doing things, and they want more education, and they want to contribute.
Well, and I guess the same idea was behind Elder Hostel to some degree, wasn't it? Explain that a little bit, since we have a younger crowd here. What Elder Hostel really, its philosophy was.
Well, Elder Hostel started probably 40 years ago, and they were 2 hippie-type guys who came back from Europe in hostels, and they were at University of New Hampshire, I believe, talking to the president there, a friend of theirs. And at the time, they had empty dormitories at this campus, and these 2 guys said, "Hey, why don't we have something like, something like a hostel, but for old people, called Elder Hostel?" And that was the idea. It was inspired by filling university dormitories and teaching these poor old people some classes and having them stay there. Back then, 40-some years ago, older people did not go to college or were not accepted in all the classes. When I went to the college that I went to, required that you finish the degree in 4 years. There were no people just coming in and taking occasional courses. It was a 4-year college, and that's what you did. So the idea of allowing old people the opportunity to take college classes and stay in a college dormitory was what started Elder Hostel. Over the years, that completely changed because as people, a different age group, or younger people became older, had different ideas about what they wanted to do. Going to college wasn't that big a deal, and it became more of a tour company. But it really started with allowing old people to go back to college.
Well, I'm going to come back to aging in home and Fairbanks, but Cliff, I want to ask you, oftentimes when professors are tasked to be chair of their departments, it's sort of like a black mark, they don't look forward to it. But you've served various administrative functions over time. Is there something about it that you found conducive to your talents?
Well, it's enjoyable to be able to help people do what they want to do. And to do that, you have to have resources. So when resources were good, it was fun. This department had, you know, the associate deaning, sometimes taking over as dean. Actually, one of my proudest moments was I was able to award a bachelor's degree to my son in computer science.
Oh, nice.
I just happened to be acting dean at the time and was taking care of the ceremony. But anyway, if you've got the resources and can actually do something, it can be fulfilling, I guess is the best word for it.
Well, I was kind of intrigued that one of your positions was acting dean for the College of Liberal Arts. Now, being a mathematician, was that a bit like a wolf in sheep's clothing, or like, did they think of you as an interloper?
Well, you know, mathematics belongs in liberal arts.
It is a liberal art, yeah.
Really?
I think you're thinking of humanities.
Oh.
Humanities is one of the liberal arts.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, it was part of the
Quadrivium was
quadrivium, right?
geometry and algebra were in there.
Yeah, and music and
Yeah. yeah.
but anyway, so.
Okay, so anyway, but there was a certain amount of, it was kind of nice being in liberal arts. And in point of fact, the department asked to be in liberal arts for a while. But the thing is that they were kind of afraid of us, and they left us alone. And at that point, we were a very large department. We were, in fact, about 25 faculty members, over 100 students, and we were fairly powerful, and certainly powerful within the College of Liberal Arts. Most of the people there were humanities, social sciences, and so on, and they left us alone. They left us to do our thing. That was kind of nice. However, our proper place was really with the hard sciences, the physical sciences, and eventually we went back there. The university loves to reorganize. As Barbara mentioned, we started out in the College of Mathematics, Physical Science, and Engineering, moved to liberal arts, came back to sciences with, at that time it was all the sciences and engineering, and that's where they exist now.
So.
Well, except that engineering is shifted off.
Now, help me here a little bit. What's the importance when it's properly aligned? How does it affect its mission, and how does it accomplish it any differently?
Well, if you have a unity of purpose, it does help. Basically, disciplines can support each other, and that's important. But I don't know that it's really necessary. As I say, we existed just fine within liberal arts with all the humanities people. Yeah, they probably looked askance at us, but,
Sort of like
and
the
we
Shark
probably,
and Jets.
I'm sorry.
No,
Kind of like that, but not it didn't make too much difference to us which unit we were in. Mainly what was important was, did we have the resources to accomplish our mission? And our mission was multi-faceted. We had our own majors. When I was department head, it was computer science, mathematics, and statistics. And we also had a very large, and we've always had a very large support, especially for the engineers, but as time went on, for other units as well. Life sciences got to use more and more mathematics, the social sciences in general, and especially with the arrival of statistics within the department. As you mentioned,
yeah.
statistics is very obviously involved in all things humanity, but especially in the social sciences.
Well, before you go, and we go back to aging at home, I want to ask, how are we doing? We touched a little bit on this. From your perspective, there is this ambivalence that the general public views mathematics. I think often they're a little intimidated. But are we doing a good job raising the next generation of mathematicians, do you think?
I think there's a definite lack within the educational establishment, the early educational establishment of appreciation of mathematics. One of our colleagues always used to tell a story about visiting an elementary classroom where the teacher said, "Okay, children, now it's time to take out our textbooks for that subject we all hate," and pulled out the math book. I think people like that shouldn't be in schools at all. Actually, it might be stronger than that. But I mean, might think about firing squads or something. But there's definite fear, and there doesn't have to be. I mean, it can be fun, and Barbara and I both find it fun, and a lot of other people do as well. Taking a physical situation, translating it as closely as possible into things that can be treated mathematically, and then solving the problem, and then going back to the original situation. You get a real sense of accomplishment, or you can, when you do it successfully.
Barbara, any thoughts before we go?
I see a lot of mathematicians in the audience. All those who love mathematics? Yeah, same.
You stack the crowd, though, on this one.
Possibly.
Well, let me ask you, talk about a new generation, and we talked about, what's the thrust of aging at home in Fairbanks?
Oh, well,
Well, I mean, it
that's
seems pretty self-evident, but there obviously must be more to it than that.
I like to develop things that I need. Lifelong learning was something that I wanted to do. Aging at home is for older adults who want to stay in their own home but have more trouble taking care of things, or who need references for services that they'll need. We recently needed a plumber. The plumber that we used 40 years ago isn't in town anymore. And by being in Aging at Home, this is a membership organization, we have access to a list of recommended providers, and we were able to go that list and find a plumber. At the moment, we have an old water tank that needs to go to the dump or somewhere, and it's too heavy for me to pick up, and I don't have the appropriate vehicle for it, so I will call the office, and they'll find a volunteer with a truck who can come and help me with this. This is a tiny job. I can't call a contractor to come and take one item to the dump, and I can't do it. So as you get older, there are more and more things like this that you need a little bit of help with. And if it gets to be too much, you start thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't live here by myself anymore or whatever. So this organization, membership organization, it's you pay to join, is designed to help people stay in their homes, provide some social activities, which are also available, and that's all there is to it.
It seems like it's a great creative response to not a problem, but a situation that is growing in relevance.
This is not unique to us. The original, one of the original ones is Beacon Hill Village in Boston. That started, it was about 2001 or something. And they, a group of older people, I guess there was a man and a woman up in their house that they loved in Beacon Hill part of Boston. And there was ice or sleet or something, and the man was leaning out the third-story window, and the wife was holding on to him, and she's thinking, this isn't good. And she thought, well, there must be, we have a lot of neighbors in this category, we want to stay here, but we can't handle this. And so they got together and formed an association to help each other and find younger volunteers to to help them stay in their home, and they called it a village, the Beacon Hill Village. And that got written up in the New York Times a few years later, and they had phone calls, you know, hourly practically from all over the country, people wanting to do this. So the concept has been around for a while. They helped to form a network of organizations like this. It's called the Village to Village Network. So when we formed this, and there are quite a few people in the audience who helped form that, the one in town, we chose to not call ours a village because that's too confusing in Alaska, but we had models. We joined this organization and had lots of information about how to do it. So we're not alone. We're not unique. This is a current movement for older adults who want to stay in their own homes. Yeah.
Sounds great. I mean, it sounds like taking responsibility.
I didn't bring any brochures, but I'm sure Mary Ann has some cards.
Well, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience here in a minute, but we actually did get an audience member with a couple of questions, and I thought they were pretty good. My question is, with a math degree, do more doors open to math graduates than other degrees? And is there any negatives to having a math degree?
Well, I don't know of any negatives, but as
Wasn't
far as...
there that half of the line and the other half is zero only?
Most graduates with bachelor's degrees in mathematics, if they don't go on to graduate mathematics, they often end up teaching in high schools, and these are ideal people to be teaching in high schools. They won't go around saying, let's look at the textbook for the subject we all hate. Others go into scientific labs or governmental labs. There's a great deal of opportunity there. And probably at least half of them. Well, I should say law schools. Law schools love to get math graduates, logical thinking.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Think about that.
It is. When we've had graduates do that. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Probably at least half of the people though do go on to graduate education with a thought to either going into the government work. We've had colleagues, for example, that went into NASA and CIA.
CIA?
Oh yeah. They love talking about cryptography and so on. Yeah. But probably a good proportion of them have an eye on college teaching. Once you get experience in that when you're a teaching assistant, and if you happen to like it, some people don't, of course, but if you happen to like it, and I did, and Barbara did, you get paid to talk. Who doesn't like to talk? That's as good a way to go. Then you look
And
for.
they pay to attend.
Then you try to get a job in a college or a university.
Barbara, did you see AI when you were starting the computer sciences program, artificial intelligence? Did you see that coming down the line?
Probably not, no. No, it was our first program, our first degrees. We were just worried about Fortran. In math, we didn't teach COBOL, the business department did that. It was just basic beginning programming, and BASIC was one of the languages, and oh my word, there were eventually these portable computers that were fairly small. But we didn't see AI coming back then, no.
Yeah. Anybody who has a question, why don't you shout it out and I'll repeat it for everybody? Okay. Well, John Gable.
What would you say are the big challenges math and stat faces today and here, and any advice for approaching those?
Let's see, now John is currently still in the math department. And I retired 28 years ago.
Still hear a few things.
The big challenge is,
Yeah, actually, John, I think would be a better person to answer that question. I retired almost 20 years ago, so.
yeah.
But certainly resources. This is always, I mean,
I lost the question. What was the question?
From the perspective of the department head, resources is one of the primary interests. You know, where do you get sufficient funds to hire enough people to teach the courses? And how do you apportion those people into the appropriate courses?
I can say something too. I think it is more challenging to be a math now or a math professor, I think, because back in the day, it was a good thing to go into math and science because there was a lot of funding for research and on space research and so on. I don't know how it is now. Do people think it's irrelevant, and would they prefer to do something more like job training?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's very, very little funding left for pure math research.
Yeah.
And the people in the department that are getting it, it's for, like, through NIH and things that have applications.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I might add to that, I think mathematics and being able to develop mathematical models is the best possibility we have for looking at the problems in the world, problems in pollution, problems in weather, and so on. And to ignore this and to slight it, I think is a real mistake, and points to abysmal ignorance of one of the best possible tools for learning about our world.
You know, I just think about its application to so many things. I mean, having covered some science stories, modeling is just a huge part of being able to capture and predict the dynamics of the natural world. I can't imagine how you do that, you know, I guess go back to Hogwarts or something. Well, Clif and Barbara Lando, thank you so much for talking with us this evening.
Thank you.